about the great work happening on campus. And it's even better when I'm joined by friends and colleagues like Catherine McKenna, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Bill Morneau, Minister of Finance, and Kirsty Duncan, Minister of Science and Sport, who's also the proud MP right here in Etobicoke North. My friends, I'm here to talk to you about something that you think about all the time, your future. As students, you probably spend a decent amount of time wondering what kind of job you're going to have, what kind of community you're going to live in, what kind of country you're going to inherit. Well, I want to talk about an issue that will shape your generation's future more than any other, climate change, and what's at stake for you in the next few months as we debate whether to finally do something real about it. I don't need to tell you how important it is. You see what's happening all around you. Extreme weather events are becoming more frequent in number, more expensive to clean up, and more devastating for Canadian communities. We see climate change in loss of habitat, species extinction, poorer air quality, easier disease transmission, and forced migration for millions of people around the world. Vous n'avez jamais connu, au cours de votre vie, une année durant laquelle les changements climatiques n'ont pas été discutés. Il s'agit tout simplement d'ouvrir les yeux pour constater que notre environnement subit des changements alarmants et sans précédent. Et nous savons que les changements sont attribuables à l'activité humaine. We've known for a long time that we have polluted our planet too much, and the consequences have grown more obvious and more serious. So the very real question we have to face as a country is this: will we ignore what's right in front of us, or will we act? Will we kick this can down the road yet again to be dealt with in another place or at another time, or will we show some courage and do what needs to be done for this generation and the next? In recent years, we've seen floods from downtown Toronto to Cape Breton Island, while in my hometown of Montreal, more than 50 people died from a heat wave just a few months ago. Spring in Manitoba brought with it the worst drought on record, sending feed prices through the roof for farmers. And it seems like once a season we hear reference to the storm of the century. 2 years ago, we had a wildfire in northern Ontario that almost northern Alberta that almost wiped Fort McMurray off the map. And at our cabinet meeting in Nanaimo this summer, you could barely see the sun at noon through the smoke from the forest fires. But you all know this. You've seen the news, and the stories are all too familiar. It's the world you were born into, and you know no other. It's the air you breathe. But let me tell you, it wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. This problem exists because your political leaders have done far too little about it. You know that, too. And lately, both here and abroad, there seems to be more and more of them who want to do less and less. It's not that we don't know what to do. Science and scientists have been clear. They've been clear about what's happening and what needs to be done about it. Et les économistes nous ont montré la voie à suivre pour faire croître nos économies et nous préparer à l'avenir. Les entreprises sont déjà en train de bâtir l'économie de demain. Plusieurs d'entre vous travailleront sans doute pour elle, ou encore mieux, vous lancerez votre propre entreprise. Lorsqu'il est question des changements climatiques, on connaît bien le problème et la solution depuis des décennies. Le vrai problème, c'est que la pollution est gratuite et donc on pollue trop. Both the problem and its solution have been clear for decades. It is free to pollute, so we have too much pollution. We have so much of it, in fact, that the world's leading scientists told us a few weeks ago that we have just 12 years left to make a real change. Today's leaders have a fundamental responsibility to you, to young people here at Humber and across the country, and to every generation that will follow you. And here's the thing. We are the first generation that has known how to fix this problem, but we are the last generation that will actually be able to do something about it. Tomorrow, or even later today, I suppose we will hear from those who oppose our plan and are willing to ignore what's right in front of us. People who are willing to pass on to you and to your kids and grandkids a more severe and expensive problem. Well, I, for one, refuse to leave this problem to be dealt with by some other person at some other time. We have to deliver a safer, healthier, more prosperous future for Canadians and their families. We can and we will. And we're already on our way. Nos ministres ont fait preuve de leadership en prenant des mesures importantes pour réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre, renforcer nos communautés et protéger nos familles. L'élimination de l'électricité produite par le charbon, la construction d'infrastructures adaptées au climat, la protection de nos océans et la collaboration avec les industries pour exploiter l'immense potentiel du secteur des technologies propres. Voilà, entre autres, quelques-unes des initiatives que nous avons entreprises pour nous préparer au monde de demain, tout en créant des bons emplois dès maintenant. Today, we're taking another big, important step in the fight for a cleaner environment and a better future. So here's what we're going to do. Starting next year, it will no longer be free to pollute anywhere in Canada. We are going to place a price on the pollution that causes climate change from coast to coast to coast. And we're also going to help Canadians adjust to this new reality. After all, people are anxious about the cost of living. It can be hard to make ends meet. That's why we've cut taxes for the middle class, strengthened the Canada Pension Plan, and introduced programs like the Canada Child Benefit for families. And that's also why we're going to help Canadians thrive in a country where pollution is no longer free. Because it's not enough to create a cleaner economy. We have to make sure that regular Canadians can afford it. 2 years ago, I spoke in the House of Commons about the urgent need to put a price on pollution. And since then, many provinces and territories have risen to the challenge, either by building up their own plans or choosing ours. Others have chosen not to. And so, we will act. We will implement the National Climate Plan in the provinces of Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and New Brunswick. And in those 4 provinces, we will send a climate action incentive directly to Canadians to help them adjust to an economy in which pollution is no longer free. Here in Ontario, a family of 4 will get $307 with their tax return this spring. That amount will more than double to $718 by 2022. 8 in 10 Ontario families will get back more than they pay directly. And there will be a 10% top-up for people living in small, rural, and remote communities. Through this plan, we will also increase our support for small and medium-sized businesses, municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, and Indigenous communities. These investments will be good for the environment, create jobs, and strengthen local economies. And let me be very clear. The Government of Canada will return all of the money collected through pricing pollution back to Canadians. Every nickel will be invested in Canadians in the province or territory where it was raised. My friends, putting a price on pollution is the best way to tackle climate change because it works. William Nordhaus, who just won the Nobel Prize for his work on the economic impact of climate change, called British Columbia a model example of pollution pricing done well, and with good reason. In BC, pollution is down, jobs and growth are up. And people around the world have caught on. More than half the global economy has a price on pollution, from China to Europe to California. A pollution price is no longer a radical idea. It's ambitious, as it should be, but the science and the economics behind it are settled. La seule façon de s'attaquer à un problème d'une telle taille est de faire en sorte que les gouvernements et le secteur privé travaillent ensemble. Aucun d'entre nous ne peut espérer relever le défi que représentent les changements climatiques seuls, mais ensemble, nous pouvons bâtir des communautés résilientes et des économies prospères. Les incitatifs économiques encourageront les entreprises à innover, à élaborer des technologies nouvelles et plus efficaces, à créer des emplois et à faire de notre planète un endroit plus propre et plus sain pour tous ceux qui y habitent. Et n'oublions pas que le marché mondial de la croissance propre offre des possibilités de plusieurs milliers de milliards de dollars pour les entreprises et les pays qui choisissent de mener la charge. When it comes to climate change, some people will tell you that the problem is too complex, that it's hard to explain, that the solutions are even more complex and even harder to explain. Well, I think that's an excuse offered by those who, for whatever reason, don't want to act. Maybe it's a politician who smells an opportunity to win a few votes. Maybe it's an investor who sees the chance to make a few short-term bucks. Whatever their reason, their long list of excuses won't cut it anymore. Here's what one leading scientist said last month when talking about the solution to climate change. We show it can be done within the laws of physics and chemistry, then the final tick box is political will. Well, I know that Canadians have that will. And I also know that you are counting on us, and we will not let you down. 12 years. 12 years ago, my wife Sophie and I were just starting a family. We have 3 kids now, and our eldest Xavier just turned 11 last week. And when I think about what Canada should do to play our role in fighting climate change, I think about your generation, and I think about theirs. This is not about politics or about the next election. This is about leadership. It is about seeing this problem and its solution for what it is, a moral and economic imperative to act. Those who think otherwise should be honest with you and explain themselves. If not now, when? If not us, whom? 12 years from now, you will all have some serious questions about the decisions made by political leaders today. I, for one, intend on giving you a good answer. We can do this, my friends. I promise you. We have to cut pollution, and we have to position our economy for the future. And by working together, we can and we will do just that. Thank you. Now, I'm happy to start off taking a few questions from media first, but then I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you. We'll have about 45 minutes for questions and answers and comments on pollution pricing, on the environment, on the subjects that I know you're all deeply versed in here at Humber, so I'm really looking forward to that. But first, we take the journalists' questions.
Hi, Bill Fortier, CTV News. In English and French, if you could. Every day we're seeing more evidence suggesting Saudi Arabia is behind the murder of a journalist. How do we as a country justify still being in business with Saudi Arabia?
Obviously, the brutal murder of a journalist on foreign soil is something that is extremely preoccupying to Canadians, to Canada, and to many of our allies around the world. And Chrystia Freeland, our foreign minister, is working with our allies to make sure that we have a strong and concerted response as we continue to ask for more and better answers on what actually happened. In regards to our exports, we have brought in export controls before, and we're certainly opening to do that again. We will continue to work to ensure that our values are being protected and promoted for Canadians and around the world. We will always be standing up for human rights and a free and independent media.
And the follow-up.
Sorry, en français. Nous déplorons le meurtre de Jamal Khashoggi. C'est certain que nous avons beaucoup de questions pour l'Arabie Saoudite et je souligne que Chrystia Freeland est en train de travailler avec nos alliés, nos partenaires autour du monde pour avoir plus de réponses et pour agir de façon concertée ensemble. C'est extrêmement préoccupant de voir le meurtre d'un journaliste comme ça. Nous avons des grosses questions pour l'Arabie Saoudite sur ce qui s'est passé. Nous avions, dans le passé, déjà utilisé des contrôles des exportations, des permis d'exportation pour limiter nos exportations dans les cas préoccupants. Et nous sommes tout à fait ouverts de faire ça encore une fois, parce que les Canadiens s'attendent à ce qu'on défende toujours sans équivoque les droits humains.
And the follow-up question, in concrete terms, what would it take to get Canada to pull out of the arms deal? If an international investigation finds Saudi Arabia is responsible, do we pull out of the arms deal?
As I said, we have used export permits in the past, and we are willing to do those again. One of the issues we are faced with is a contract that was signed by the previous government that makes it extremely difficult for us to withdraw from that contract without significant financial penalties on Canadians. We are working very hard and looking at our options because, as we've said, this situation and if indeed the stories that are widely being reported turn out to have been the case, then Canadians expect us to act. Okay. La réalité, c'est qu'on est dans une situation où le contrat qui a été signé par Stephen Harper et le gouvernement précédent rend ça extrêmement difficile de sortir de ce contrat sans des pénalités exorbitantes sur les Canadiens. C'est pour ça que nous sommes en train de travailler attentivement pour voir quelles seraient nos options si nous voulions poursuivre une telle piste. Mais comme j'ai dit, on peut toujours limiter les exportations par des mesures qu'on a déjà utilisées.
Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. Several premiers have come out against your carbon tax plan and vowed to fight it every step of the way, including in this province. Premier Doug Ford has called it a scam. What is your message to those premiers today?
The Canadians have been very clear that they are worried about climate change, worried about the impact on their future, on their kids, on their future generations, worried about the impacts on their livelihoods and on the kinds of jobs that they'll have and their kids have. There is no more debate about whether climate change is real and whether we are responsible for it. The only political debate that seems to remain is whether or not we should actually do something about it. The science, both on the scientific side and on the economic side, is unequivocal that putting a price on pollution is one of the best ways to move forward, and we are doing exactly that. I think the question for Conservative politicians is if they do not want to act, who do they expect to act in their stead? And are they really serious about being willing to push this off, as unfortunately politicians have done in the past? The time is now to take real action, to stop making pollution free, to put a price on it, and to make sure that families are well supported, better off than they were before, so that they can thrive through this transition we all know we have to go through. Je pense que les provinces vont devoir les provinces qui ne veulent pas avancer avec un prix sur la pollution vont devoir répondre à des questions difficiles de leurs citoyens sur si ce n'est pas eux qui vont agir, bien qui devrait agir. Parce qu'il n'y a plus de débat sur si on devrait agir ou non. Mais ces politiciens conservateurs continuent de penser qu'on peut repousser le problème. L'ONU a été très claire. On a 12 ans pour agir. On a déjà attendu trop longtemps, très longtemps. Le moment est venu pour agir maintenant et les provinces qui ont agi déjà, comme le Québec, comme la Colombie-Britannique, ont démontré que la croissance et la protection de l'environnement vont la main dans la main. Alors, je pense que les premiers ministres conservateurs qui résistent vont réellement devoir répondre à la question pourquoi ils ne pensent pas qu'il faudrait agir. Pourquoi ils ne pensent pas que de mettre un prix sur la pollution et de compenser les familles canadiennes pour les aider dans cette transition, ce n'est pas la chose évidente et logique à faire.
Just as a quick follow-up, you opened by saying this is Minister Duncan's riding, but of course it's also Premier Doug Ford's riding, and you've chosen to make it very personal by appearing here today. So do you now see Doug Ford as your main political opponent?
I don't see provincial premiers as opponents. I see them as partners. Canadians across the country want us to work together to deliver on the big things that matter. What is that? Creating good jobs now and into the future for future generations, making sure we're protecting our environment, making sure we're keeping people safe. These are the things that all Canadians want. These are the things that I'm going to be working together with premiers on right across the country. As to why we're here today, this has been Kirsty Duncan's riding since we both got elected together way back when in 2008. And this is an issue that is both perfectly suited to Humber College with its leadership on environmental issues and perfectly suited to Kirsty as our Minister of Science. It is time to act responsibly, and we will do exactly that. Je suis très content d'être ici aujourd'hui dans le comté de notre ministre de la Science pour souligner à quel point la science est claire. Notre responsabilité d'agir, c'est maintenant, c'est aujourd'hui. Et nous allons le faire comme gouvernement. Nous allons mettre un prix sur la pollution et nous allons compenser les familles pour les aider à vivre ces moments de transition où on va créer un monde meilleur avec plus d'emplois et de meilleurs emplois pour les générations futures.
Chris Selley for the National Post. Premier Ford says this is just a tax grab, and more than that, he says it won't even help the environment. How do you explain to Canadians exactly how this works? You put a price on carbon, what happens that leads to lower emissions?
At the simplest level, we put a price on something we don't want, pollution. Pollution is right now free. For a company or a business to put climate change causing pollution into the atmosphere is free. We know, and it's basic economics, that if you start putting a price on something you don't want, people will look at ways of not having to pay that price. We will incentivize and give clarity to businesses on making investments in efficiency, in clean energy retrofits, in the kinds of things that actually bring us closer to being able to reduce our emissions and fight climate change and stave off the rise in global temperatures that could be catastrophic. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of the Nobel Prize in Economics winner from just a couple weeks ago, who has highlighted that putting a price on pollution is the best way to fight climate change.
Just a quick follow-up. So then, I mean, while people are waiting for their rebates, they're going to be facing higher prices on gasoline, electricity, things that they might say they can't do without, things they can't afford. What do you want them to give up? What do you want them to change?
That's exactly why we are bringing in the incentive at the same time as we are bringing in the price on pollution. It will start for large emitters on January 1st, but around tax time is when we will be sending people their incentive checks, or actually giving them their incentive through their tax returns, and that's when the price on pollution will go into place for everyone. We want to and we need to support Canadians through this time of transition. That is exactly what we are doing with this. Nous enverrons l'argent pour compenser les Canadiens pour le prix sur la pollution dans les provinces récalcitrantes, en même temps que nous amenons ce nouveau prix. Nous savons que les gens veulent faire partie de la solution pour contrer les changements climatiques, mais nous savons aussi qu'on doit aider les gens dans cette transition. C'est exactement ce que nous allons faire. Ils vont être mieux avec cet argent qu'il l'était avant le prix sur la pollution dans les provinces qui n'ont pas voulu faire leur propre plan.
Hi, Prime Minister Marika Walsh with iPolitics. You're giving Canadians the money before the costs of the carbon tax actually hit them. You're giving it to them up front. Are you buying votes ahead of the fall election?
On the contrary, we recognize that there is an imperative to put a price on pollution and an imperative to help Canadian families adjust to the new reality of a society, of a country in which pollution is no longer free. That is why we are making sure that at the same time as the price on pollution gets implemented, we will be giving upfront the money to people that they will be spending on the price that is on pollution. This is a principle that is essential to us, that people get support as we move forward into this transition.
Are you not just trying to buy
Au contraire,
votes
nous amenons un prix sur la pollution parce que nous savons que c'est essentiel d'agir sur le changement climatique, mais nous savons aussi que nous devons aider les familles à assumer les coûts sur la pollution. C'est pour ça que nous envoyons en même temps les chèques nous donnons l'argent par les impôts en même temps que nous amenons ce nouveau prix sur la pollution.
It's a very unpopular tax, though. I'm wondering if you're using
But I'm
these
buying
checks.
votes with it, right? That's
Right,
what
but
you're saying.
so I'm wondering if you're using these checks, though. I'm wondering if you're using the checks to try and get Canadians on board.
I think Canadians have demonstrated time and time again in conversations that everyone has had with them that they want to be part of the solution against climate change. They want to reduce their carbon emissions, but they also want to be able to be helped through the transition that we need to go through. That's why we have said that as we bring about the fight against climate change, as we protect our environment for future generations, we will also support families through this time of transition. This is what we've committed to from the very beginning, supporting the middle class and those working hard to join it. And that means also supporting them through moving into a cleaner, greener future. It is common sense that if you put a price on something you don't want, pollution, people will pollute less. And if there are costs associated with for average families, we will more than compensate those families for those costs.
Morning, Prime Minister. Fatima Said with National Observer. You've spoken about the United Nations IPCC report for the first time in public. I've mentioned it several times today. How precisely does your plan, your national climate plan, respond to the clear and present danger illuminated in that report? And does it go far enough given the extreme situation we're facing in 12 years?
Putting a price on pollution is a significant and meaningful step in the fight against climate change. It is an essential step if we do want to fight climate change, but it is not on its own sufficient. That's why we're moving forward in green infrastructure investments. We're moving forward in investments in renewables. We're moving forward in incentives and support for small businesses, for large businesses, to transform the way they do things. We have an entire climate plan that will reach our 2030 targets, and will demonstrate not only that we can do this, but that we can lead the way in demonstrating solutions for the rest of the world as well.
A quick follow-up. The Pan-Canadian framework talks about the need for more initiatives to reach those 2030 targets. What are they going to be exactly, aside from this carbon tax?
We look forward to working with jurisdictions, whether it's municipalities or provincial premiers across the country. We look forward to working with experts and industry groups on moving forward in concrete ways to build cleaner, stronger economy for the future. This is what Canadians expect. We will be meeting our targets, and the way we are going to do it is by putting a price on pollution so that the things we don't want, pollution, will become less prevalent.
Hi, Kit Kohlberger, Humber News. I'm just wondering what the role of post-secondary institutions like Humber is in fighting climate change.
I think, first of all, as a place where young people gather to learn and to develop their future, we cannot help but reflect exactly on the kind of future we're leaving for them. Our responsibility towards them, towards future generations, means we have to act right now. And as I across the country and speak with young people in post-secondary education institutions right across the country, it is very clear that there is an imperative to act for real right now, and I would encourage Conservative politicians to spend more time talking to young people in our post-secondary education institutions, and they will see that there is no longer a debate around whether or not we need to act on climate change, and they will understand that pricing pollution is the best possible approach. I'm happy to be here at Humber today because it is a place that, as we've seen, has shown real leadership on not just learning about climate change, but solving the challenges that are related to it in a way that leaves us all better off as we protect the environment.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Merci. Merci tout le monde. Thank you, media. And now we'll just bring in some stuff so we can chat.